Shalom, everybody. We are in the fourth class of our series of Rav Kook on Rav Kook's philosophy of the world. And one of the biggest questions in philosophy that everyone has to deal with is how to view the bad in the world. Now, if you're a monotheist, you believe that God is perfect by definition, which means that the world is good, which means that the world is full of hope. On the other hand, before or as opposed to Judaism, there are other approaches as well. So let's get right into it. Go into the share screen here. What we're going to learn today is from Orot HaKodesh, The Lights of Holiness, Volume 2, page 488. And the heading, From Chaos to Goodness, Rav Kook on the different ways to view evil. You will see very clearly the process that we're going to talk about. She'ifot hayeush ve'atzala. The name of this paragraph, Rav Kook calls the strive for hope and despair. There are different levels of optimism. There are different levels of pessimism in the world, and they are a matter of principle. Arba she'ifot omdot beruach ha'adam. There are four desires, four ways of seeing the world among mankind. Nishpaot miruach ha'olam b'machlakotav. And the degree to which you are optimistic or pessimistic are the way one sees the world. How much evil is there in the world? And Rav Kook is going to work from the bottom up. Ha'achat, I'll already foreshadow, Rav Kook is talking about paganism. She'ifat hara hagemura. Paganism believes in bad. The world is bad. The world is violent. God has nothing to do with morality. There is no hope for goodness. There is no hope for love. And it's a very basic way, almost animalistic way of seeing the world. And if bad, evil runs the world, then inevitably we attribute and legitimize bad in every aspect of life. This is, from this way of seeing the world, came paganism. And she works, paganism is working in all of her all of her filth, even in the modern world, in all of her different offshoots. Anybody who has a vineyard knows that, but it's very common in a lot of trees, that you have growing out of the very bottom of the trunk, you have, in Hebrew, it's called chazirim. These offshoots, which are not going to grow any fruit, but they steal, that's why they're called pigs in Hebrew, chazirim, they steal nutrients and water and energy. And that is why farmers usually cut them off as soon as possible. Rav Kook says that even today, we have what's called neo-paganism, new or modern paganism, bechol risha, in all of her evil, machala. Rav Kook says it's a sickness, sichlut, stupidity, churban, destruction. As we'll see, this approach brings destruction to the world. Bein hagluyim benivulam, whether we're talking about paganists in the olden days who admit to being paganist and admit that it is violence which runs the world. Bein hamichusim b'me'ateh hayofi hachitzoni. Here, Rav Kook is referring to neo-paganists, that surround themselves and present themselves as modern ideology. The most outstanding example is Friedrich Nietzsche, who we'll talk about soon. Kvod midume umishtar memshelet tevel. This is the way that they see. This is how what is honored in the world. This is what rules the world. Now, the concept of paganism in Rav Kook is a very important concept. And we're not just talking about polytheism, how many gods there are. Is there one or 10 or 100? But Rav Kook writes in many places that this polytheism, having many gods, inevitably leads to immorality. Now, we don't know this from the Tanakh, that the paganists, if they were really frum, if they were really religious, they gave human sacrifices. And Lemahadrin, they would give their own child or their own firstborn as a sacrifice. And what is the problem? The problem is there is where does this come from, I should say? As soon as there are two gods, and how much more so if there are 10 or 100, what are those gods going to be doing all day? So we who grew up in the Western world, we learned a little Greek mythology. We know that they're fighting all day. But I tried this exercise with Israeli students a couple years ago, and I asked them, if theoretically there's the God of strength and the God of beauty and the God of the sun and the God of the moon, and there are a lot of different gods, what do you think those gods do all day? And they hit it on the head. They're always fighting. Why? Because each god has powers and are jealous of the opposing or competing god. And that's why each one is fighting and everyone wants to be the king of the hill. So if there are even two gods, inevitably they're going to be fighting with each other. What's the problem? There's a klal in most religions, and so too in Judaism, called imitatio Dei. Rav Soloveitchik mentions this a lot. Rav Kook mentions this a lot, that we imitate our deity. We imitate our God. Now, in paganism, if the gods are violent and man imitates his God, so man can also be violent, and it's built into the system. Now, we know from the Tanakh that paganism led to immorality. We know from archaeology, and we know from Chazal, famous Gemara in Masechet Sanhedrin, that why were there many Jews who served idols? It's not that they believed in this gold or silver god, but lo avdu Yisrael avodah zara ela atir la'atzmam arayot. In the pagan temples, they had a good time. There was a lot of drunkenness, wine and meat and orgies, and if you wanted to have a good time, so you went to serve the idols. In other words, we're talking about a very physical oriented culture where the gods are violent, so man too is violent. Just to show the other side of the coin, some of you may be familiar with Professor Amnon Shapira, Zichrono Livracha. He put out a very good book in Hebrew, and I just understood that it's coming out now in English. I helped a little with some of the questions in the English translation. It's called The 80 Revolutions of the Tanakh. And one of the most basic revolutions is that when Am Yisrael comes to the world with monotheism, if you have one God, by definition, nobody can fight with him. So he is a God of peace, and that is why one of the names of the God of Israel is Shalom. Some of you may know that the halakha, that you're not allowed to say Shalom in the bathroom because it is one of the names of God. The Mishnah Berurah even asks, what do you do if you have a friend or your husband is named Shalom? He says, well, you can't call him in the bathroom, but call him Shalom with an N at the end, and he won't notice the difference. But what is the idea? That in monotheism, our God is a God of peace because nobody can fight with him. Imitatio Dei, this is the God that we imitate. And man in monotheism is expected also to be Ohev Shalom, Rodev Shalom, Ohev et Habriot, to love peace, to run after peace. The concept of love your neighbor as yourself is built in to monotheism. So that is the first point. The second point, which Rav Kook writes about, which is even more basic, is if there are two gods, and how much more so if there are 10 or 100 gods, each one of them lacks certain things, right? Each one of the gods has his turf, right? The god of strength is not beautiful. The god of beauty is not strong, right? The sun is strong during the day, but weak at night, and the moon vice versa. In other words, everyone has their turf. Each god is in charge of something. But if you're a god and you have certain powers and you lack something, what are you going to do about it? You're going to try and take it. In other words, in paganism, the gods by definition are takers with a capital T. That's what they do. And that's how anthropologists explain how primitive man, how did he invent or discover, whatever you want to call it, his gods? A primitive man saw these powers that are outside, that are above his control. Now, man, even primitive man, has an ego. We don't like to feel helpless. And man goes out and he sees the ocean. For example, the ocean sweeps away a person's child. And man feels totally helpless. And he says, well, there is this power. They called him Poseidon, right? The god of the water. And he saw this young man and wanted to take him as a servant. Or he saw this beautiful young girl and wanted to take her as a wife. In other words, the gods have needs, and day and night they are taking away from man. Man in paganism does not like his god. Man is not a happy camper because the gods are always taking things away. Similarly, if a person's field burned down, primitive man said, well, this god, the god of fire, Pyro, right? He was hungry and he burned down my field. So what am I going to do next year? I'm going to give him a nice big sheep or bull and say, well, God of fire, if you are hungry, please take this bull and leave my field alone, right? And so the gods, in the eyes of primitive man, they are takers. And what is the concept, for example, of sacrifices? How do anthropologists explain how did primitive man come up with the idea of sacrifices? It's bribery. Again, God, take this sacrifice and leave my field alone. And again, imitatio Dei. If the gods are limited, then they are takers. And if man wants to imitate his God, then man is also going to be a taker. And that is how primitive culture used to run. The biggest bully made himself the king. His henchmen were the second strongest. And the weaker, they were always being exploited. You know, sometimes young people today, they don't understand where the concept of chauvinism comes from. Who decided that the father is the head of the family? Well, in the primitive world, where a person was judged by the size of his muscles, so men were the leaders and women were second class and children were third class. In a culture like this, man does not like his gods, but again, he's always has to bribe them off with these sacrifices. What's the other side of the coin? Comes Avram Avinu and Am Yisrael with the concept of monotheism. In monotheism, we say God is perfect. That's the definition of monotheistic God. If he's perfect, he doesn't lack anything. If he doesn't lack anything, he doesn't need to take anything. So what does he do all day? The answer, he is a giver. A monotheistic God is a giver. He gives us health. He gives us sunshine. He gives us rain. He gives us love. imitatio Dei. This is the God that monotheists emulate. So if you're a monotheist, you believe in goodness, in giving, in altruism. It's on the agenda. And we don't even realize how, and again, if you want to see interesting sources from the ancient world, from ancient religions, look at for Amnon Shapira's book, The 80 Revolutions of the Bible, and he spells it out how the world was a miserable place until monotheism. A third point of how paganism is not just a mathematical problem, but it's a moral problem, is what happens on Judgment Day. In paganism, there's no one absolute truth. There is no one absolute morality. So, what happens on Judgment Day? You can justify anything that you want, and the world is going to be anarchy. And everybody is taking from each other, and morality is not even on the agenda. Comes monotheism and says, no, there is one God, which means there is one absolute truth. There's one objective morality, which means that there is a judgment day. And after 120, every year in Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, at your birthday, whatever, we believe that there is a heaven, there's a hell, there's reward and punishment. All of this is a direct outcome. How did Voltaire say? Even if there was no God, we would have to invent him. And one of the aspects is that there's no morality unless you have one monotheistic God. Maybe a fourth point, which is important to mention, is that in paganism, sometimes anthropologists, they work backwards. If you look at a culture which is very physical oriented, and even the gods are gold and silver and strong and beautiful, that means, that infers that that is a very physical oriented culture. Again, which is based on meat and wine and orgies and having a good time. On the other hand, if an anthropologist sees that there is a culture where God does not have a body and God is spiritual, well, that infers, says the anthropologist, that that culture raises spirituality to the height. And it's better to be a giver than a taker. To summarize what we've seen till now, again, when we want to understand where paganism was coming from, it's not just a mathematical problem. Is there one God or two gods or 10 gods or 100 gods? It is a moral problem. Monotheism, on the other hand, that we're going to talk about, obligates morality to be on the agenda. Or if I were to put it another way, like we recently read in Kriyat Torah, in the 10 Commandments, only after you have the first 5 commandments that there is only one God. You shall not have other gods. You shall not swear by other gods. You shall not bow down to other. Only after the first 5 commandments can you come down with the second 5 commandments of thou shalt not kill, thou shalt not steal, etc. In other words, what Rav Kook is explaining is that we who grew up in a monotheistic society, even somebody who's atheist today, already mankind has matured and accepted morality as a value. But getting back to paganism, paganism does not see morality as a value. And this is not just paganism. Rav Kook mentions neo-paganism. What was Friedrich Nietzsche's take on morality? Is the famous question, according to Darwin's theory, how do the Jews survive? According to survival of the fittest, the Jew is not the strongest. The Jew is not the most beautiful. So how does the Jew survive? So Nietzsche comes up with this theory that, true, the Jew is not the strongest and he's not the most beautiful, but he is the trickiest. And the Jew tricked mankind into believing that there is a concept of morality. So when the bully comes to conquer the Jewish people, we would turn to the bully and say, what? You don't have a heart? You don't feel sorry? You don't believe in morality? And that is, I'm not going to get into the issue what was Nietzsche and what they say his relatives added things or changed things in his Ashkafa, but what is called Nietzsche's thought is also mentioned in, excuse me for mentioning Adolf Hitler and Mein Kampf in the Beit Midrash, but he bases himself on Nietzsche, where Hitler does not believe in morality. He says morality is an artificial invention of the Jewish people. The Jews are a bunch of wimps. And just like the women will excuse me, just like the women who can't fight and compete, so they had to use conniving to get what they want from the men. So too the Jews are not strong enough, said Nietzsche, and we had to invent this concept of morality. And we are proud of the fact that we brought morality and monotheism to the world. But sometimes we forget how problematic the world was. Now, Rav Kook writes about this a lot. Let's see another source. Go into the share screen. In source number 2, where Rav Kook talks about, this is also from Orot HaKodesh, volume 2, Hitgalut HaTov Bashkafat HaAchdut, the revelation of goodness. Again, in the first paragraph, he calls it hope as opposed to despair. Here he's going to talk about goodness as opposed to evil. Hashkafot olam hen. There are two ways of seeing the world. Hashkafa hama'achedet. There is the world, the view of unition, uniting. On the other hand, hashkafa hamafredet. There is the view of the world which divides. Now, again, this rings a bell, because what is the world of division? That's what's called in Kabbalah Alma de Piruda, the world of division, where the world, before God created the world, what was there? There was God. There is absolute unity. What happened when God created the world? If you look in Genesis chapter 1, the key word that appears, the verb that appears all the time, is vayavdel. God divided between light and day. And vayhi mavdil ben mayim lamayim. And then God divided between water and water. Vayavdel ben amayim asher mitach al harakia. God divided between water on the heavens and water beneath. And afterwards, zorea zera etz pri oseh pri lemino. Asher zar'obo, the idea of being fruitful and multiply and having seeds. Every creation, every step of creation is more and more division, more and more multiplication, more and more pirud, less and less God, less and less seeing the unity of the world. And that is why in our three-dimensional world, every object begins here and ends here. Everything has a beginning and the end, and by definition is separated from everything else. This is the world of paganism, which separates between the God of beauty and the God of strength, which separates each power from each other. Now, this is a pessimistic way of looking at the world. Let's jump down to paragraph 3, Gimel, 2 Gimel. So Rav Kook, at first, he talks about the way of seeing the unity of the world that we're going to talk about later, excuse me. But first, here he talks about the pagan way of the world of separation, of division. Lumatoshel ashkafa el yunazu, as opposed to seeing a world of unity, nimtset ashkafa hamafredet. The pagan world sees the world as separate, as chaos. Haroet amtziut hamufrada betor chazon amiti. They say that the world really is always at war with each other. Vazarut shel kol matzui el mishnehu. and the foreignness that you feel for me and that I feel for you and that the dogs feel for the cats and the cats feel for the mice and everyone feels separated in this world which people are not happy. And again, this is connected where it's not a coincidence that Darwin and also Schopenhauer, who we're talking about now, but also Nietzsche, were more or less around the same time period, where if you see the world as dog eat dog, that the dogs are constantly chasing after the cats and the cats chasing after the mice and the mice eat the cockroaches and everyone is eating each other, and a person sees the world as chaos. This, in this world, there is no hope of love. There is no hope of peace. I remember one time, it's not just the dogs chasing after the cats. I remember I took a group of students from our midrashah on a tour in Midbar Yehuda in the Judean desert. And the tour guide, I still remember, Yitzchak Saper, uh, we're walking around and we see a wild herd. How do you know it's a wild herd? Because there's no shepherd. And in the herd, there are like 40 females and there is one male. And then Sapir pointed out that no, there are two males. And that, if we want to see something very interesting, we should be very quiet, don't move. And oh, this is the only time in my life that I ever saw a scene out of National Geographic. You know, those photographers in National Geographic, I don't know how long they wait until they see something interesting and then they film it and you just see the greatest hits. Uh, Only once in my life did I ever see this, where you see the two males gnarling. It's a desert, and so you could hear every sound. They're approaching each other and they face each other and they're gnarling at each other, eyeball to eyeball, mouth to mouth, and they are about to fight who is going to be the alpha male of the herd. And then they separate, and it's as if somebody said, "On your mark, get set, and go," and they ram each other. And maybe that's where the word ram comes from. And it was you hear their horns ramming each other. Then they pull back and they ram each other again. And I think it was like three or four times. At one point, it was very clear that one of them was stronger than the other. The other was bleeding more. Now, I don't know if it was the old boy or the new kid on the block, but one of them took their tail and ran away. And this is built into nature, says Darwin, that the strongest male is going to sire the next generation. So if you look at the world is constantly fighting with each other, survival of the fittest. And the males are fighting the males, and the dogs are eating the cats, and the cats eating the mice, and this is the hashkafa of Arthur Schopenhauer. Schopenhauer was also a German philosopher, and I always tell my students that the first thing that you should do whenever you hear of a philosophy is Google and look at the personality of the person who is writing these things. Schopenhauer had a terrible life. By the way, he passed away in 1860. I think Nietzsche passed away around 1900. Schopenhauer, his father committed suicide when he was 12. I just wrote the highlights of his life. His mother remarried, and he had a bad relationship with his mother and his stepfather. And the women always did not like him. But once he took advantage of a maid and got her pregnant, and then the baby died within the first year. And Bikitsur, he has a very, very difficult life. And he sees the world as a terrible place. And Rav Kook says, well, this is neo-paganism, where you don't see the unity of the world. Maybe we'll just foreshadow a drop. What does the unity approach do? When we take a step back We dafka see unity and order in the fact that the dogs are eating the cats and the cats eat the mice, and the ecological cycle that we learned about in fifth grade, right? If there are too many dogs or too few cats or too many, if it just throws everything out of order. In other words, Rav Kook is going to say that the ecological system Davka shows unity and order in the world and not necessarily chaos. But what happens? Rav Kook explains that in paganism and in a less mature way, again, the world is constantly maturing and advancing. When a child is not mature, all he sees is here and now. And he wants all the candy, and he doesn't know about diabetes. He doesn't know about cavities in your teeth, right? The child, it's as if he sees the a picture too close up, and all you see is pixels and chaos, and you don't see any sense. But only when you step back can you see that the pixels really make up a picture. And that is a more mature way of seeing the world. But again, getting back to the way that pagans and neo-paganism sees the world, Rav Kook says they see a bad world, they see a world of chaos, a world without hope, a world of taking, a world where even the gods are takers, and man is not a happy camper. Women are even less happy, children are even less happy, the slaves are even less happy. And thank God the world has developed. So that is the first way of seeing the world. Total evil. The second way of seeing the world, continues Rav Kook, paragraph Bet, Hashi'ifa Hashniya. The second way of seeing the world, I'll already foreshadow, this is talking about Buddhism. Ki hakarat hara barish ato. This this approach sees the world as bad. Umitoch kach hakrazat hayeush hamuchlat shel kol hayesh. And Buddhism sees this world in despair. Aye, but there is good. Where is there good? In the next world, right? In Buddhism, they talk about. I have a daughter who went to India. He explained to me that when a man has his first grandchild or sees his first gray hair, he usually leaves his job and he starts thinking and preparing himself for the world to come. And the way that we can save the world and bring good to the world is by doing away and leaving this physical world. And we prepare in life for the good in the world to come. If I were to draw in a picture, paganism is a circle which is all black. Buddhism is a circle where this world, half the world is black, but if you want to think and feel goodness, you do what's called dhyana, and you can feel or connect with nirvana, the peace that comes in the world to come. You can feel a little in this world, but this world really is not a good world. Here also, um, if you want to understand Buddhism, just look at his biography and you see a very interesting story. Buddha, that wasn't his real name. He lived about 400 BCE during the time of the Maccabean dynasty. And no, not the Maccabean, before the Maccabean dynasty, at the beginning of the second temple. And his father was very wealthy. His father was like the governor. And his father loved his son so much that he wanted to protect him from seeing evil. And where do you fight? You fight with your friends. So he didn't send him to school. He just raised him on the estate. And he brought in the best pedagogue that money could buy. And this was sort of a mistake. The father wanted to raise Buddha like an etrog, wrapped and protected. he should not see anything bad. But the teacher, the pedagogue, was so smart that he knew that it is not natural for a human being to be wrapped up like an etrog. And he took him on a field trip secretly. He hid Buddha away in a carriage. They went to the city, and Buddha started seeing bad. And he saw a old man, and he asked his teacher, "Why is that guy all wrinkled?" And he said, "Well, that's what happens when you get old, and not everyone is as young and as strong and as healthy as you are." And then he saw a beggar dressed in rags asking for money. And he asked his pedagogue, "Why doesn't he get dressed?" And the pedagogue taught him that not everybody has as much money as your father does. And to make a long story short, Buddha, from his father, who wanted him to see the world as just good, went to the other extreme and saw this world as bad. But if you want goodness in the world, think of connecting with the world to come. So again, paganism is a circle which is all bad. Buddhism says the bottom half is black. This world is black, but the top half, the world to come, is white. It's good. Now we're ready for the third approach, Hashi'ifa Hashlishit. And this is Christianity. Christianity in philosophy, at least Rav Kook, and I think most philosophers relate to Catholicism in its original form. Hashi'ifa Hashlishit, the third approach in seeing the evil in the world, the bad in the world, Hiyeush Lamechza. It is seeing this world despairing of half of this world. Klomar Lityaesh Me'arisha Be'atzma. There is no hope for the bad in this world. There is bad in the world, says Christianity, and there's no way of fixing it. You remember, resist not evil, right? That's one of those verses that growing up in the Western world, we learned from what they call the New Testament. You can't fight evil, right? Turn the other cheek, right? It's not worth it to fight because you cannot win the Satan. The Satan has powers, according to Catholicism, just like God created good, the Satan created the bad. So there is bad. For example, mammon, money, gold, they say was created by the Satan. Women, or the sex drive, they say was created by the Satan. That there is no hope for improving this world, the problematic side of this world, the physical drives which get us unspiritual, you got to get away from them. That they despair and they give over to the Satan that which is physical. You remember another verse that from the Christian world, give unto Caesar that which is Caesar's, and give unto God that which is his. In other words, Caesar is in charge of the physical world. He is in charge of the money. He is in charge of the taxes. He is in charge of the army. He is in charge of the physical world. So if you want to be spiritual, you should leave that Caesar world, that Satan world, and just focus on the good world. Hanigrar harbe acharei mar'eh einayim, right? The world, the Catholicism, who gives over to the physical gods, the Satan, and that is the way they see the desires of this world. Ulatzil mitoch yeush zeh, they despair of half of this world. Et hapnimiyut shel hachaim, shezeh atzar hatov shelahem. But again, like we said regarding monotheism as opposed to paganism, Christianity is monotheistic. We won't get into the question of Trinity, but they definitely, compared to paganism, it is monotheistic. And accordingly, Christianity, you know what? There's a beautiful, this I heard from Rav Yisrael Hess. friend of mine, he wrote Sifrei Emunot, had a beautiful, beautiful explanation of source number 8. Let's just jump down for a second, where is a famous midrash about Cain and Hevel, Cain and Abel. Vayomer Cain el Hevel achiv, and Cain said to his brother Abel, what does it say? It doesn't say. The Torah doesn't say what he said to him. But Vayhi biotam basadeh, when they were out in the fields, Vayakem Cain al Hevel achiv vayargeu, and Cain got up and killed his brother Abel. Now, obviously, they were fighting about something because it says, and Cain said something to Abel. But what were they fighting about? This is the time for the Midrash to take over. First opinion. Vayomer Cain el Hevel achiv vayhi biotam basadeh al mahayu midainim. What were they fighting about? Amru bo nachlok et ha'olam. They said, let us divide the world, right? We're two sons. You inherit half. I'll inherit half. Echad natalita karkaot. I'll take the real estate. And the other said, natalita metaltalin. He'll take the things, the objects. Dina mar ara da'at kaimale didi. Hey, we agreed that I take the real estate, which means you're living and standing on my property. You should be paying me by the minute. On the other hand, Ze'amar ha'aretz asher ata omen v'dina mar madat lavish. What you're wearing, didi, the clothes that you're wearing, you should take them off, or you should pay me because we agreed that I will take the objects. In other words, din amar chalotz, din amar prach, mitoch kach vayakam kain el hevel achi vayargeu. Mankind, even when somebody owns 50% of the world, he is jealous of the other 50%. And this is, you remember, the sons of man, how you say in Hebrew, Bnei Adam. That's us, that's people. So the classic fight that people fight about is property. Second opinion, Rabbi Yoshua de Sachnim b'shem Rabbi Levi Omer, no. Shneim natlu et karkot, shneim natlu et metaltalin. Valma ayu medainim. No, they divided the world. Everything was fine. But, so what were they fighting about? Elazeh omer bitchumi beit hamikdash yibaneh. The holy temple is going to be built in my part of the world. V'zeh omer bitchumi beit hamikdash yibaneh. So they were fighting a war about religion. Third opinion. Yuda barami omer al chava rishonayu midainim. There was only one woman in the world, and they said, what's going to happen when Adam, our father, passes away? So they were fighting who gets to take the mother. Second opinion, but similar. Amar Rav Huna te'oma yetera nolda im hevel. There was a twin sister born with Abel. Cain said, I am the firstborn, I get to take the girl. On the other hand, Abel said, what do you mean? She is my womb mate. Right? We were born together in the same womb, we were twins, and I should marry the twin sister. And that's what they were fighting about. Anyway, what is the meaning of this midrash? We all know the midrashim are not meant to be taken literally, most of the midrashim. Chazal are telling us that there are three topics about which explain most of the fighting and violence in the world. The first opinion says that they were fighting about money. There were a lot of wars over oil, over land, over money. People fight with each other over you scratched my car. The second is that people fight over religious wars, the Crusades, the jihad, right? Holy war. The third type of war and violence in the world is over women. And that is the classic story, whether knights in shining armor joust. Two knights want the same girl, or they have a sword fight over the same girl, or they box over the same girl, or the cowboys have a duel over the same girl. Instead of asking the girl who she prefers, they just fight over her, right? There's a passed down over every generation. And Bekitsur, um, very interesting. Rabbi Israel Hess points out that these three topics are the most loaded topics in mankind. And that's why Chazal are saying, B'nai Adam, people, this is what they fight over. What is the reaction of Christianity? If a person wants to be a Catholic priest, he has to swear three vows: poverty, chastity, and obedience. Poverty is the answer to the problematic topic of money. The Christians say, let's swear off of money to be a holy person. Don't work for a living. And if you want to solve the problem of religious war, obedience, don't ask questions. And if you want to solve the problem of wars over sex, don't get married, celibacy. So the three oaths of the ideal Catholic are exactly correspond to the three drives of mankind. What is the approach of Judaism? Judaism says, don't despair because everything is created by God. Money should be used for good, and questions should be used for good. And the drive for the opposite sex should be used for good. That's how the world exists. In other words, to summarize, getting back to the third approach, as opposed to paganism, which draws a black circle, the world is bad, just violent, no goodness in the world, no hope, no love, not in this world, not in the world to come. Buddhism, the second approach, draws a circle where the bottom half, this world is bad, black, but the world to come is good. So we despair of this world, but they have hope for the world to come. The third circle, that of Christianity, says the whole world to come is good, just like in Buddhism. What about this world? Half of this world is good, half of this world is from the Satan and is bad. And if you really want to become holy, you have to stay away. That is the third approach, which is three quarters, 75% good, but they still believe that there is 25% of the world which is run by the Satan, which is inherently problematic. And the only way to relate to it is by running away. That's how they think there can be peace in the world. Let's remember, by the way, that when Jesus was alive, what was going on in the land of Israel in his time? Um, the Romans were oppressing the Jews were rebelling, and Jesus did not help out his brothers who were doing war. That's one of the big topics today in Israel, but we don't want to get into current events of those yeshiva boys who don't help out when Am Yisrael is at war. But Jesus also believed, in pacifism. He went out to the Judean desert and he contemplated good and peace. But that is not the Jewish approach. What is the fourth approach? And here is the approach of Am Yisrael, of the people of Israel and the God and the Torah of Israel. Hashi'ifa haravi'it, the fourth approach to the world, hi ha'omedet lahatzil et hakol. We don't say give to Caesar that which is Caesar. We don't say give Satan. We say everything belongs to God. He is one and only, and he is perfect, and he is good. And therefore, we do not despair from anything. We believe in love. We believe in peace. That's why real monotheistic religions believe in the Geula, in the redemption, because we believe that if there is one good God, that means that there is hope for the world, and that as mankind matures, World War I was terrible. World War II was terrible, but at least America got involved in World War II. They learned their lesson. They didn't wait too long. And Since then, the United Nations, they don't always succeed, but at least the modern world has matured. And instead of just taking out the cannons, the mature world today knows that it is better to have peace in the world. Now, again, as Rav Kook always draws, that there is constant evolution with an arrow at the top, that we have yet to achieve the arrow. But getting back, השאיפה הרביעית היא העומדת להציל את הכל, מבלי להשאיר גם צרור. Rav Kook here is paraphrasing psukim, that we do not leave even one clod of earth outside of godliness. This should sound familiar. Chazal say this in the Midrash. The Zohar stresses it. Most people quote the Baal Shem Tov on this, but it really is basic Judaism. Lit atar panui minei. No place is void of God. And there should be godliness also in money. And that's why we have so many laws of choshen mishpat and how to do justice and tzedakah and help people with money and obligations to help the Jewish community and the Jewish nation with money. And also regarding the drive of questioning. We say, go to the Beit Midrash and question as much as you can. And what about the drive for sex? That is exactly the mitzvah of having a family, finding your soulmate, having children, loving. The concept of love is built into real monotheism, that we say, no, there is no Caesar who owns anything. There is no Satan who owns anything. Lachshov machshavot lebal yidach mimenu nidach. That to think of how to bring goodness to every single topic. Latzil et haguf kamo haneshama. We want to save the physical world together with the spiritual world. Not just like in Buddhism, who despairs from this world, and not like Christianity, who despairs from the physical in this world. We want to elevate and find godliness also in food. And also, even wine. There is a time and a place to use wine on Purim and at Simchas and Kiddush and Havdalah to use the physical world and to reveal the godliness and not despair from anything. We believe that the external world deserves to be saved and to be godly, just like the internal world. And even that which appears to be bad, we want to save it. We would prefer not to have to fight our enemies. We would love for them to be good. We want a world of peace. We don't despair from anything. That is what Judaism is about, to take those topics which people think are inherently bad, and we say, no, nothing is inherently bad because God is good. He created free will that man can choose to use anything for good, but the way it is meant to be, but it could also be used for wrongness, and that is good. Free will is good. The world is good, but there are things which can be overdone. This is something that Rav Kook talks about in Orot HaKodesh. He uses the term, there is good and there is hatov hamitaveh. There is evolving good. He doesn't call it bad. He says things which at first glance could be bad or could be used for bad if you overdo it or underdo it, but the world is essentially good. To elevate the entire world to be good. That's what the Gemara in Masechet Psachim that I brought for you, famous Gemara in source number 5. This world is not like in the future. In this world, when we hear good news, we make a bracha that God is Hatov Metiv, He gives good. The al besorot raot, and when bad things happen, Chas v'shalom, a person passes away, you say the bracha Baruch Dayan Emet, that God is a just God. But le'olam haba, in the future, kulo hatov v'metiv, we will understand how even the bad really was good. Good that takes patience, that takes tolerance, which is one of the key words in Rav Kook. And again, a classic example where paganism, you know what, is like the micro. When you go into a kindergarten and you ask a child what is the opposite of boy, he will say girl. But as the micro, the individual develops, he realizes that boys and girls, men and women, dafka, they harmonize each other very well. But that you don't see in kindergarten. Similarly, when mankind was primitive, the world, the pagan world, the primitive world, they saw everything as chaos. Everything is contradicting. Every god is fighting with each other. Every country is fighting with each other. Everyone wants to be imperialistic and conquer the world, etc., etc. Thank God we are monotheistic and we believe and have taught the world that there is hope and not to despair. Et olam hayechidi b'chol erchav hachomriyim, not just the world of the individual, but et olam hachevroti b'chol sdarav, also all of society. You know, people have a tendency to say that man, in his lowest common denominator, that's what comes out when you get the masses together. The masses bring out the worst common denominator. We say, no, there is hope also for nations. La'amid hakol al basis hatov. Zoti she'ifat Yisrael. This is the desire of Am Yisrael. Hamivuta b'ma'amakei Torah, which is expressed in the depths of the Torah. B'yesod ha'emunah, the depths of faith and belief, balichot ha'chayim, in the ways of life. That's why we have so many laws regarding the physical world, what to eat and what not, what to drink and what not, the laws of procreation, the laws of tarat mishpacha, the laws of nation, the laws of war. B'chol milchamotav ha'ma'asim v'haruchanim, ein ketz al kisei David v'al mamlachto. Notice, Rav Kook, as a religious Zionist, brings in that nationalism, the ideal, Mamlechet Kohanim v'Goy Kadosh, that Am Yisrael is supposed to be a light to the nations, that is an essential part. Why? Because Davka, where the Christians, for example, who are better off and more moral and less despairing than the Buddhists and the paganists, but they also say, give to Caesar that which is Caesar runs the army, Caesar runs the economy. We say, David Melech Yisrael Chai v'Kayam. Am Yisrael believes that nations and armies and economies are also meant to be moral. And that is, Baruch Hashem, the nation of Israel is always the first. Whenever there is a tragedy or earthquake, we are the first one to send a field hospital. And Israel has the highest rate of the world of altruistic kidney donations. That is how to give an example to the rest of the world. Shelo laniach larishayin oshut v'lo risha olamit afilu kim lo nima. We do not despair and we do not give to Satan or to Caesar anything. Va'elilim kalil yachlof. You all know this from the Rosh Hashanah davening. And all of the pagan gods and all the pagan powers which split up the world into Alma de Piruda, into different lacking. This God is this power is that. The Torah harmonizes all of the different topics and all of the different drives, where everything before God created the world was one. God created a world of division, multiplication, pruervu, but in the end, the goal of the Torah is to vigarza evim keves. The lion is supposed to live together with the lamb, and there will be peace among the nations of the world. That messianic dream, that again, as we see mankind maturing, that is part of the monotheistic dream. V'nizgav Hashem levado bayom ahu. On that day, the one and only God, He will be all that remains. Because people will realize how every topic is not, again, seeing pixels too close, you don't see anything. But take a step back, v'nizgav Hashem levado bayom ahu, and you see that there is unity and a harmony in the world. Yismechu hashamayim v'tagel haaretz. Rav Kook is quoting the pasuk. What is he doing it with it? He says that the heavens, spirituality, and the earth, the physical world, should be harmonizing together, and all of life, all four quarters of the physical world, the spiritual world, and the world to come, v'yomru bagoyim Hashem malach. And even among the nations of the world, God will rule. In other words, monotheism, goodness, morality, that is the hope and not despair of monotheism. Okay, any questions or comments? Bevakasha, opening up the floor. Let me check the chats. No. Wait, how do we get into chats? I always forget how to do this. Notes, more. Here, chat. Oh, that everyone thought like Rav Kook. Oh, I wish that other people would fight like Rav, would believe like Rav Kook. Somebody once asked Rav Tzvi the Kook, how are we? Yeah, sorry. Yeah, Nachum, you wanted to say something?
Yeah, no, my question, I just kind of lost the three element of Catholicism. You mentioned chastity, you mentioned, but I think I lost the one. You made the list of the three.
Chastity,
Yeah.
poverty, and obedience.
So how does the poverty matches with the paganism? I mean, we are different from the Catholic because we want to use richness for good, right? That's the, I think is a
We
difference.
use money for good. There, we have an obligation, for example, to support your family. We're
Yeah.
not like the Catholic priests who say, no, you're not allowed to work for a living. They live off of the church. I didn't know that as a kid. That Catholic priests, they're not allowed to touch money.
If you grow up in Italy like me, you know. Yeah. Okay.
I'm sorry?
If you grow up in Italy like me, of course you know,
Oh,
right? Yes.
ah.
Okay. So yeah, thank you. Thank you.
You definitely know it. Okay. Any other comments or questions? Okay. I hope you all enjoyed it. And we'll see you Bezrat Hashem next week for another very interesting class in Rav Kook. Be well and have a good week. Shalom, shalom.